Welcome back, those of you who are here. We're going to do a little bit of a soft start. Some of you didn't get up, some of you did, so I'm going to have you do just this much exercise. So I want to figure out who's here, and I'm going to do that just by asking a few questions. And if you meet the criteria of the question, I just want you to stand for like 3 seconds and then sit back down. Or if you can't stand, you can wave your hand. But it kind of helps me know who's here. So let me start simply. How many of you, this is your first student that you're sending off to college or university? Just stand up for a second. Everybody can look around. This is about seeing who else is in the room with you. Great, thank you. You can sit down. How many of you are pros, seasoned pros? You've sent one or more off to college or university. Stand up. Be proud because it's an accomplishment. And those of you who are new to this, look around. These are the people you should be saying hello to when we're out in the lobby having coffee, because they can tell you what works and they can give you horror stories. And I think you should hear both of those to kind of get a sense of what happens. Thank you. How many of you are dropping off a student to live in residence? If you could just stand for a second, everybody look around, we'll figure it out. Great, okay, and then how many of you are, your student is commuting? Stand up for a second or wave. Okay, so a nice mix. Thank you all for being here. Let me ask an academic question. So I'm going to ask kind of like what area of study they're going into. How many of your students are going into business, commerce, management, stuff like that? Can you stand just for a second? We're all going to look around and stare at you, and you can sit back down. Great. How many of your students are going into science-y things? That's my official classification. Math, computer science, physics, science-y things. Okay, thank you. How many of your students are going into arts or humanities or communications type things? Could be theater, could be history, could be stuff like that. Okay, great. How many of your students are going into other social sciencey kind of things? Anthropology. There's usually okay. Okay, now, how many of your students, you think they may tell you what they're going into, but you don't really think they know? Honestly, how many of you think that? Because it should be about a third of the crowd, to be honest. Okay, because let me give you a statistic. About 2/3 of students across North America change their academic interest at least once in their first year. Experienced parents, do you know what I'm talking about? 2/3 change their academic interest within their first year. I want to encourage you and challenge you to be supportive if that starts unfolding in your family. Okay, so students, when they're here all of a sudden, maybe they've never had a chance to take an anthropology class. Man, I hope they take an anthropology class. Maybe they've never had a chance to think about psychology. Wouldn't that be great if they could learn more about psychology? And if they discover a new passion or a new interest, encourage them to kind of stick their toe in it a bit more, stick their foot in it, stick their leg in it to try it out. You know, one of the great things about UTM is we love it when your student wants to mix and match wild combinations. So we have things called specialists, and that's where you devote most of your time and energy to studying kind of one particular area. We have majors, and that's a little bit less than a specialist, but you're devoting a good portion of your 4 years here, your students' 4 years here, studying that. And then we have minors, which are just, they're still going to focus in on a topic, but not as heavily. So we have minors, majors, and specialists. And what's really nice is we think mixing and matching is great. Most students, if they go into this in their first year, kind of knowing what they're interested in, they can generally graduate in about 4 years. That's not unusual. Some go to 5. It does not distress us. So encourage them to explore their interests. They will do better if they're exploring their interests in all of their courses. Now, I'm going to hit some of these topics. So I start with a setup, because I know a lot of you help pay the bills. So 5 money-saving tips for students and their supporters. The first one is your student gets, I'm going to use this a lot, for free because you paid for it in tuition and fees. So you've already paid for it. So it's, think of it as free. Gets a Mississauga Transit My Way U-Pass as part of their enrollment. If they're a student at UTM, they get one. We've already sent them an email that lets them download their Presto e-pass thing. So they can activate that and start using it. I've already saved you how much? Somebody who's in accounting, start tallying, just guessing and tallying some numbers. Second, we have a shuttle service that's operated by this campus that runs express route from the middle of this campus to the middle of the downtown Toronto campus and back at crazy wild hours. It starts at like 6 a.m. and I think it's every 20 to 30 minutes. And it runs all the way until way after dark. It's a little bit different on weekdays versus weekends. There's some variations, but it's an amazing service. And it's also free. So encourage your student to take advantage of that. Like U of T is a rich, rich place, not in terms of money, but in terms of culture. So if there's an event happening downtown where some world famous speaker is coming in, they should go. And same here, if we have some world-renowned researcher who's doing a presentation here, St. George students come here. They have to pay for every ride. Your student has fare free access to the shuttle. Fitness club, Shaliza mentioned it as well. We have a fantastic recreation, athletics, and wellness center. 25-meter 8-lane pool, running track, outdoor fields that are beautiful, fitness studios, dance studios, squash courts, gymnasia, yoga course. Guess what? You can just start saying, when you see me starting to do this, free, it's free, okay? It's a great facility. So that's something that your student has access to. This one maybe is not as flattering, but I'm going to mention it. So if your student is driving a vehicle onto campus, if you haven't already heard, you will, they have to purchase a parking permit. There is no free parking. We don't use tuition and government support to pay for building parking decks. It's user pays. So they're not cheap, but there are different price levels. So don't let your student convince you that they have to have the underground parking garage, because we have one, but it's priced as an underground parking garage. The permit is a lot more expensive. We also have lots that are a lot bigger, and you can kind of come and go into the spaces in that lot. You're not guaranteed a space, and students are very impatient. If they can't pull in and immediately spot a space right at the front, they're like, the lot is full. Probably not true. We monitor that. And over the first 2 weeks, I will say the lots are very busy. But if your student has a little bit of patience, it will be fine. They will find a parking place, and they will have saved money by getting one of those kinds of parking permits than the super expensive ones. There's also pay and display. So if they're just here, maybe they usually use their My Way, they're riding Mississauga Transit, but one day they need a car. You don't need to buy a permit for that. They can just buy a pay and display for that day or for a couple of hours. Okay. And my final money saving, textbooks and workbooks are not cheap. But in a lot of cases, you may be able to save money by helping your student figure out if leasing of textbooks makes more sense. They turn them in at the end, we reuse them for another generation of students, or they can buy used textbooks from others, both the bookstore and other students who are just selling things that they were in last year. In that case, we simply ask the student to either look at the course syllabus that it's for or speak with the instructor to see if the instructor is, if it's really important that the student have the very latest edition of that book, because some of these textbooks, they have a new edition comes out every couple of years, science changes, et cetera. But it's good to check in with the instructor or look at the course syllabus, which kind of tells the expectations of the course, whether or not that's going to be important or not. Okay, so those are my money savers. I'm going to do about 2 more of these, and we'll pause and we'll take questions on those, and then we'll keep going. how to find out how your student is doing. This is tough. Some of you are okay to be pretty hands-off as long as you just have a general sense that your student's doing okay. And some of you have just a driving need to know exactly how they're doing. You know who you are, whichever category you're in. So what I want to do is I want to give you a way that we've used with some other parents, and that is to say, parents and families. Classes here either run from September through December, or the middle of December. We call that the fall term. Some classes run from January to April. That's the winter term. And then some classes run the full time. So it's one class that runs from September through April. And at the end of each of those periods, when a class is done, the grades are posted onto the thing that Shaliza mentioned called Quirkus, which is our learning management system. It's where they can kind of watch their grades. It's almost like an online grade book. What I would encourage you to do, I don't want you to surprise your student with this at the end of the term. I want you to say it to them in the next week, if this is important to you. I want you to say, you know what? If you don't make A's this term, it's okay, because the first year of university is hard. But I would like at the end of the term for you to show me how you've done in classes. So say that now, right? Set the expectation now. And if you set it that way, it's a pretty friendly negotiation. And what you do is you condition it with, and if you as a parent or a family or a supporter is helping them financially, just say, you know, before we start in January, I kind of want to know how you did, because it's expensive and I don't want you wasting your time or our money. But I also don't want you to freak out if you don't make A's. You got to put both sides of this in the discussion. And then that's how you can kind of in December and January have that discussion with your student about how did it go? What courses did you love? Which ones did you hate? What did you do well in? It feeds a really healthy conversation. That's what we want you to have. So that's the sneaky way to bargain, finding out how your student is doing. Oops, no. Related to that, kind of, it is not unusual for family financial situations to change for the worse. And we want you to know that when that happens, you should encourage your student to have a discussion with the financial aid advisor. We literally, within about a week, if a student comes in and says, Dad lost his job, or someone in my family has had a medical emergency, or whatever, we can reassess their eligibility for financial aid, typically within 2 or 3 days. We work with OSAP, we work with the federal government. We generally can help. But your student needs to come and tell us as soon as they know what's going on. Okay, so just keep that in mind if there's a dire change in your income as a family that impacts your student. Let me do one more and then we'll pause. I'll start this one with, again, kind of stories of families past. And I've already been asked this today. How often do you expect your student to let you know what's going on? This is probably more important for those of you who have students in residence, but it applies to commuters too. Let me use the commuter example first. I have spoken with students who have complained about their parents. I tend to think that students are the ones who are sending the first message in every exchange. Not what I actually see happening. Mom or dad or sister is sending a message about every 45 minutes throughout the day. That may be familiar to some of you. Please talk with your student about what level of communication you expect to have with them starting this fall. And I would encourage you to try to loosen up that timing. Okay? Now, let me go to kind of another extreme. Do you expect your student, if they live in residence, to communicate with you at least through a text that says, I'm okay, once a day? Is that reasonable? Or every second day, maybe? Have that conversation now. Do not wait until you're in a panic situation where you think, I have not heard from my student for 14 hours. Because some of the people before you at that point call campus police and say, oh my God, where is my student? I have not heard from them. Now, I'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in a second. But if you'll have that conversation now and have reasonable expectations, I would call it more of a negotiation with them. That will help you have a better relationship with your student this year and them to have a better relationship with you because you're clear on the expectations. Fair? And if something does get out of pattern, so if your student and you agree that you were going to text every night, even if it's just, I'm okay, and that doesn't happen, so all of a sudden it's been not 24 hours, but 48 hours, and you're going into the next day, and you're thinking, okay, this makes me nervous. Try your student again, but then if you need to, you can call, for example, the residence Don. For those of you who have students who are living in residence, you can contact the residence Don. Now, the residence Don is not going to say to you, oh, he just got back. He said he was in Montreal having a great time. He forgot to tell you. The residence Don will not do that. But the residence Don will try to find your student, and they will say, your mother is harassing me. Call her. And they will. Like we want safety to be part of the situation here, but we also want to balance privacy and the change in their lives. And sometimes they do forget. We want to balance that out. Is that okay? Okay. If we want, I've got time for, let's do 2 questions for now, but again, we'll linger afterwards. And what I just covered, so those first 4 bullets, anybody have a question or a thought that they want to raise? Maybe not about your particular student, but kind of more generic about that? Yes.
So, any sort of transportation that could help you?
The email is sent to your student's University of Toronto email address for the Mississauga Transit MyWay UPass. The message comes from, say again? Bytemark. Yan, is that right? The message actually comes from Presto's service provider, Bytemark. And that message then is what they would click into in order to be able to access their digital UPass that lets them ride Mississauga Transit fare free because, you know, it's free.
So what if you have not received it yet?
Have your student, if they should be eligible, they can contact the student government, the student union that's in the student center, and they'll help solve that. Or if they have trouble downloading or stuff like that, and they literally are downloading it onto their phone. And that's what they show the driver when they get on a Mississauga Transit bus. One more question? Yes, ma'am.
So, my question is, we're going how to find out how your students do.
Yeah.
So we'll, as parents, we will receive their score report.
I am glad you asked so that I disappoint you now instead of later. So the question is, will the family receive grades? Absolutely not. And even if you call us and you say, I paid every dollar of the tuition. What do you mean I cannot figure out how my student did? We won't tell you. But that's why it's important that you negotiate some tool that works for whatever your situation is so that you can kind of figure out how it's going. Now, I generally don't think you'll be surprised. I generally think families are intuitive and can sense if things are going well or poorly. But I recognize that some students are pretty clever. But have that discussion now. Set your expectations. I want to see in December or January how you're doing so that we can make sure that this makes sense for us all. Okay? You can, if you want to drive a harder bargain, you can say, you know, I know in January on the Acorn system, your grades for your fall term is going to be posted. I want to watch you log in. I hope you'll be in a situation where you and your student have more trust in that. But you can negotiate what works for you and your family. Okay, I'm going to slip on to my next bullet. Why drop off and pickup times matter. And again, I'm going to tell tales about parents who I'm sure are worse than you who come before you. We have some commuters especially, where if the student's class starts at 10 after 9, the family member drops them off at 5 after 9. And if the course ends, if they're done with their day and their course ends at 2, the expectation is the car will be out front at 2:10. You need to be there to get in it. I understand, but that is a bad idea. They're missing out on the rest of the university experience beyond what's happening in classes. They need time to go in the library and work. They need time to meet up with study buddies who are in their classes to review materials and get ready for tests and debate things that are going on in their classes. That's important stuff. They need time to socialize. If they're not making friends here, there's a lot of lost opportunity. So I really want you to think about encouraging your student to spend time exploring, having fun, going to workshops, joining a club, those kinds of activities that are going to take up more time than just their class schedule. 2 notes related to that. I think that your student having some employment, even in their first year, is a good thing if they manage the amount of time they spend doing it. There is university research in Canada and in the US that says students who work between 10 and 15 hours a week while they're studying do better academically because it forces them to structure their time, and it also, a sports phrase, it puts some skin in the game for them. That they are investing as well as you, if you're the financial supporter, they have a bit of money that they are contributing toward this as well. Now, 10 to 15 hours is kind of the range that we think is ideal. We hire work-study students across the campus. And you know what? We say no more than kind of 15 to 20 hours at most. Our jobs are great on campus. We understand the life cycle of the term, so we know that students get a little bit crazy near the end because they're prepping for exams. We know that during reading week, we'll talk about that in a second, that they probably won't be around. So I think we're a really good employer. So if they have a chance, they can go on the Career Center website. They can look at our campus work study employment opportunities. They apply. They have to have a resume. We interview them. All that stuff happens, but it's a great experience for them. It helps us. We use a lot of peers to deliver our services, student peers. So don't be surprised sometimes when your student comes for some support if we say, hey, let me introduce you to your fellow student who's a work study employee of ours who can help you with this because they have a better perspective and can explain it better than me. You know, I'm trying to explain something to a student and I'm using a word like cool or some phrase that I'm just obviously using inappropriately because I'm too old. But having a student peer who's delivering those kinds of messages, we value, we make happen, we like it. Good ways for shy students to make strong connections. I think one of the smartest bits of encouragement that you can give your student in the first 3 weeks is for them to join. We have something called academic societies. So every department, every academic department has an academic society that's where that the faculty, the staff members of that department support directly a club about that. The philosophy club, the English and drama club, the commerce association, the psychology club, every one of them, every academic department has a club. We call them again an academic society. Encourage your student to join that. That's going to be the gateway into them connecting with people in their courses. So again, it's great if they have a study buddy. You know, if one day somebody doesn't hear their alarm and sleeps late and misses their class, not a good thing, but at least if they have a friend in that course that maybe they met through that academic society, that they can connect afterwards and say, hey, can I look at your notes? Can you give me a copy of your notes from the class that I missed? It also helps their social connections. It's a great way for a shy student to get started because they typically, their events are not rah-rah, whoop-de-doo. See, there's another word I can't use in front of a student. The Academic Society's content is really great and helpful. And it's a nice way for a shy student to start getting involved. It also provides them with leadership opportunities. These clubs elect their student leaders to be president, vice president, treasurer. They have money to program activities with. So like they're good roles. So I would really encourage that as a best way. But then after that, I would love for them to join other clubs. Now, in their first year, I don't want them to join a dozen clubs. That's too much. But you know, if they join the Academic Society, maybe they join one of our cultural clubs or our religious or faith-based clubs or our volunteer service clubs. And then maybe they have a hobby either that they've always had that they want to continue, chess club, gaming club, again, kind of about 120 at this moment clubs. If they pick 2 or 3 of those in their first year, fantastic. And even on cultural clubs and faith-based clubs, especially cultural clubs, it's really great if the student joins the club of a culture that they're not familiar with. You want your student to have an international experience to be ready for the connected world. Encourage, I was not a student here, but as a staff member, I went to a couple of meetings because we were traveling to Indonesia. I went and had some really great opportunities to interact with the Indonesian Students Association. I don't know if any of you are foodies, but like, I like durian. If you know what durian is, you'll know why it's unusual that I like it. If you don't, it's a delicious fruit that smells like a dirty gym sock that's been in a locker for a week and then put it in a hockey bag and then pulled out with a rotten onion in it. That's the smell, but it's delicious. But I learned kind of this cool stuff from going to the Indonesian students group. And that's why I think this cross-cultural thing that can happen here is pretty magical, actually. It's part of what you're paying for, whether you know it or not, is these opportunities. Next, and we've already kind of hit it, I would say we've hit it. Don't be surprised if your students' academic interests shift, be flexible and encouraging.